See, Trump voters said they felt she and Trump were both authentic or anti-establishment. But again, Gaza came up a number of times in these responses. Quote, voted for Trump and you, not genocide Harris. Democrats became the party that supports war, and simply because of Gaza. None of this is scientific, of course, but there are some other indications that Gaza really was a significant part of Kamala Harris's loss. Remember, Black and brown voters have always had more sympathy towards Palestine and supported a ceasefire by larger numbers than white voters in general. It's plausible to think some of Trump's gains with these groups had to do with disgust with war in general and Gaza in particular. The other demographic group, of course, most disgusted with the Biden-Harris genocidal policy was young people. And sure enough, this election saw a turnout collapse among the youngest group of voters. A lot of the post-election conversation has been understandably centered around how much Trump improved his margins among young voters, all true, young men in particular. But the more significant phenomenon may actually be how many of these young voters just simply decided to stay home. As Eric Blanc points out, when you look at the total number of 18 to 29 years old who are eligible to vote, Trump ever so slightly improved his standing from 2020. In 2020, he received 18% of the total eligible population. This time, he edged that number up by a single percentage point to about 19%. On the other side of the ledger, however, Democrats collapsed. They went from receiving about 30% of the eligible youth vote in 2020 to only about 22% this time around. So Trump held on to his young voters and marginally even improved while the Democratic share plummeted. Was this a Gaza effect? When you consider the youth activism around the issue and Kamala's absolute unwillingness to take a moral stand against genocide, you gotta think that disgust with her approach was a significant factor in this drop in turnout. Her choice of Liz Cheney over Rashida Tlaib spoke volumes about her moral commitments. Of note on that choice, by the way, the Palestinian American who was blocked from speaking at the DNC actually improved her winning margin in her Georgia State House district. As she wrote on Twitter, quote, maybe, just maybe, voters appreciate when you speak out for the things you truly believe in. Perhaps disgust over Gaza really was a significant and perhaps determinative factor in this election, something even I didn't anticipate. And it wasn't just Rua who was rejected. On a podcast with Rania Khalek, Congressman Jamal Bowman revealed that his offer to campaign for Kamala in Michigan was also rejected. Listen to what they chose to do instead.
I then told them, I could share text with you so you have evidence of this. I am ready to be dispatched to any parts of the country. Let me know. I want to go to Michigan in particular, right? I told them this. They never get back to me. Even worse, they send Richie Torres, Bill Clinton, and Liz Cheney to Michigan. So again, and not only that, Bill Clinton is scolding Arab Americans.
Yeah.
Like, yo, they were there first. Pretty much they were there first. Y'all got to just deal with it or leave. Like, this is what their campaign decided to do. Let's not send Jamal Bowman there, who, again, I have, thank God, alhamdulillah, right? Like, so much support in Michigan where, like, my opponent attacked me for it. Like, he literally was like, you don't represent your district. You represent California and Dearborn, Michigan. My opponent said this shit in a debate.
Wow.
Okay? So that is how, and he said that because he knows that's an Arab American community.
Yeah, Dan.
So
That's like rats racist.
I want to go there.
Yeah.
Right? Y'all ignore me, which tells me who you have around you in your campaign, but you send Bill Clinton and Richie Torres.
So that was the choice, basically. Bill Clinton, Liz Cheney, Richie Torres, and not Jamal Bowman or anyone else who might have been able to help with the Muslim American or Arab American community. The results, of course, speak to this being an utter political catastrophe, not to mention a moral one. So what's the counter argument here? Well, if you look at exit polls, very few voters say that foreign policy actually drove their decision. Even among young voters, only 4% attributed their vote to foreign policy concerns. As with all voters, the top concern, by far, was the economy. But I've always suspected this was kind of the wrong way to think about the electoral consequences of the genocide in Gaza. There's a way in which Gaza undermines literally every argument that Kamala and the Democrats were attempting to make against Donald Trump. How can you posture as a clear moral alternative to Trump and Trumpism when you are backing a war in which 70% of those killed are women and children? When starvation is being deployed systematically as a weapon of war, When we saw things this year like a child having their leg amputated with no anesthetic on a kitchen table, a body crushed like a bag of tomatoes under a bulldozer, an endless, ever-expanding churn of death, carnage, disease, rubble, but you want people to believe Trump's the unique evil? At the very least, his evil, it's not looking so unique. How can you position yourself as the big tent party, building a large, unified coalition, when your tent wasn't big enough for a single Palestinian-American speaker at the DNC? When you couldn't do the basics of outreach to a Muslim community that was horror-struck and utterly disgusted? That the big tent has room for Liz Cheney, but not young people protesting a genocide? Or Arab Americans, some of whom had family members who were slaughtered in Gaza, doesn't exactly send the open arms everyone's welcome that you think that you're sending. The party is open to you so long as you agree not to breathe a word about these taxpayer-funded horrors. And how can people trust that you're going to pay attention to their economic needs here at home when you seem way more eager, way more interested in sending money abroad for wars in Ukraine, Gaza, and the entire Middle East? I heard something similar to that sentiment from any number of voters this cycle. Basically, why are you focused on all these global conflicts rather than our needs right here at home? Biden really leaned into this dynamic in a bad way, in particular with all his obsession with NATO and AUKUS and inability to talk about the actually decent things that his administration did accomplish on antitrust, labor, and industrial policy. Kamala was, of course, saddled with this legacy and did nothing to break it. Even Trump's infamous they-them ad plays into this sentiment that Kamala and the Democrats are not really paying attention to what you care about. AOC herself made a version of this point. Take a listen.
All of this debate that people are talking about with this woke thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's because we care about trans people and that's why.
And by the way, only
backlash.
Donald Trump cared about trans people because he was the one running $130 million worth of ads. The Harris campaign said nothing about this issue.
That's right. That's right. And listen, the ads, it's not to even deny the fact that these ads were effective in certain areas. What I think people are paying too much attention to is the first half of that ad, which says Kamala Harris is for they, them. Everyone's focusing on that. They're not focusing on the second half of that ad where he said, Donald Trump is for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Democrats very often in their messaging, they speak in terms and in concepts and not in the second person. I care about you. And political races are not about one candidate versus another candidate. Too often it gets pigeonholed like that. It is a race to convince a person about who cares about you more.
In a lot of ways, Gaza is emblematic of democratic hypocrisy, moral collapse, and working class disengagement. Is it possible that Gaza alone cost the Democrats the election? I mean, if you think about it, Trump won Wisconsin by about 30,000 votes, Michigan by only about 80,000 votes, and Pennsylvania by about 120,000 votes. In the grand scheme of things, that's really not a lot. How many young people stayed home? How many Muslims switched to Trump in a vain hope that he'd make good on his pandering? How many working class voters could not shake the nagging sense that these wars were more important to Democrats than the price of eggs? Trump didn't deserve to win and has already nominated a bunch of neocon, warhawk, Israel first psychos to key foreign policy positions. But for this and many other reasons, the Democrats, they absolutely deserved to lose. And Sagar, I was initially...
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Crystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.